What if the reason nobody applied has nothing to do with pay? We asked 1,250 people across the US and Canada what would most prevent them from considering a job in manufacturing. And the number one answer was a concern around physical safety. Pay came in fourth. Now, I assume that was a perception problem. You know, the old picture of black and white videos and dangerous manufacturing and not recognizing the new technology that we never bothered to correct could be the assumption. So I went looking and I couldn't find it. The people already in the industry name it right alongside everybody else. I'm Trevor Blondeel, spending 25 years in manufacturing. And today I'm going to show you why you cannot recruit your way out of this one and what people closest to the floor already know and that maybe your management team doesn't. So let's start with the actual numbers, because this is having some fun here with some facts. And the concerns about physical safety. So 40% put it in their top three, and 16% ranked it number one, the number one reason they may not consider manufacturing. So both the highest of any barrier we tested. Salary not being competitive with other industries came in fourth. 33% top three, 10% ranked first. So safety leads pay at both levels. So this is not a trick of how we counted it. This is the data. And let me be straight about this whole shape of the list. You know, safety is the only barrier that cleared 40, but second place was only 6 points back. And second through fifth were all within 2 points of each other. So safety is the single most named barrier, but it's not running away with it. And this study was run by Crossover Solutions and the Center for Generational Kinetics. So of these 1,250 adults across US and Canada who are open to working in manufacturing, this is a story that's being told. Again, this is data, and I'm sharing with you the actual facts. And then I'm also sharing you my perspectives on it. We look at this data, I talk to different plants about it, and often when I go into a plant, it's talk that we just got to pay more. If we paid more, then more people would want to work here. And then, ownership or the board or maybe your finance manager pushes back, right? Pay just seems to be that easy lever, the one right in front of us. Well, it's pay. Hey, once I sat in a boardroom and we're trying to understand it, and I kind of asked the question, right? So is it a coincidence that it's just pay and has nothing to do with what we're doing as a leadership team? So it's interesting. So what do we do with this data? We have to think, okay, what does this mean to our daily operations in the plant? If people are seeing us, perceiving us, our reputation as it's not safe. So let's think about that. Fix the marketing, fix the funnel, right? So maybe it's part of it is just how you think that you can just advertise differently. That doesn't fix the problem. So and I can admit that sometimes I may have thought, well, yeah, we just need to educate people more. But is that really the issue? So I asked our research team a specific question. If this is only a picture in people's heads, then the people closest to the industry should rank safety lower. That would prove it. But here's what came back. Almost everyone, 40%, named physical safety. Among people working in the manufacturing industry, 37%. There's only a few percent difference. Now, I want to be careful here because the second group, was only 84 people. So we got a smaller, numbers that we're working with. However, the margin on it is wide. So I can't sit here and tell you that the data proves me wrong. What I can tell you is that when I went looking for evidence that this is only a perception problem, I did not find any. The people that are closest to the industry are not more comfortable with the safety. They're naming it right alongside everybody else. So this is not the answer. So we can't just say, well, hey, they just don't understand. We do have to market it differently. So it's just not the answer. And if we look at your plant and your own safety records, you may want to reflect on that. So I thought, well, how else can I look at this differently? So I thought, where else could be there like a perception gap in data? And it's just not where I expected it. So I looked at on losing your job to automation, AI, or outsourcing. And about a third of everyone put that in their top three as concerns. Among people who work in manufacturing, it drops to 1 in 5. So now that's a real gap. So outsiders, we can say based on data, carry a greater fear about automation than the people inside. And they largely, they don't. So that really tells us a story, right? So if you're in the plant and you're working in manufacturing, then you can see that, hey, maybe it's shifting more from part loaders to operators, but really it's a different take if you're working in the industry. And this to me just amplifies the importance of this safety, because there isn't a big difference. And when we think about this, it's kind of a gap, and I call it sometimes like an executive gap. So when we look at it and we say, hey, managers versus executives versus team members, let's cut that up. And this kind of caught me a little more attention. So by job level within that survey, we keep slicing and dicing the information in the survey, because we had a lot of different demographics that we could look at. And this is the fun part of unpacking this with you all as the listeners. I think we're going to have podcast episodes for the next 365 days, just kind of understanding this and understanding how do we translate this into data, into something actionable in your plant. So when we talk about the physical safety, employees 40%, right? Managers 40%, executives 33%. So think of executives as more of the people that are deciding the capital budget, right? On where the spend goes, and more, frankly, in the office. Because we talk about connecting the top to the shop, right? And manufacturing greatness, that's been a theme for us for years, because I find when the executives at the top, when the owner of the plant is connected to the team member on the floor and everybody in between, then we have world-class manufacturing. We're connected on safety, quality, productivity, and it comes together. But the further you get from the floor, then the picture paints a different story. And then we start making decisions that aren't based on our current operation. And that's when it gets dangerous. So the more connected we are to, like, hey, what are your concerns, the ones that are actually on the floor every day, all day, and making that connection. So the less connected you are, then your decisions aren't going to be as strong. So, but why would that be? Because one thing I can tell you is that I don't believe it's because executives don't care. I don't think that at all. Because if anything, I mean, I've led manufacturing plants. I've been sitting in that more of executive seat, and I would, you're concerned about that because ultimately you're responsible as the top of the organization for the safety of those people. However, there's still this gap. So I think it's about where their information comes from. So an executive learns about the floor through a report sometimes. It just happens, right? We're in boardrooms, we look at statistics. Okay, we'll prove it. If we're going to spend this, then where's the data? Okay, so a metric, a monthly review. What's a recordable rate? If the rate's low and safety looks solved. So if I got to spend certain money in certain areas, then maybe I'm not going to spend it in that area because it's not a glaring problem. The operator learns about the floor through their body, right? Because we're interfacing with equipment on the floor. They know which crossing is bad. They know where the traffic is. They got to look more. They know which guard has been off since spring. That guard that maybe got missed on the safety audit. I brought it up to somebody. It's not, it's just, sometimes there's guards on when you go into a walkway, or maybe it's some equipment that's been down for a while. Who knows? But we know that it can happen. So they know what actually happens on midnights, right? That's another crew. We know that. There's more information there. Are we pulling that information? So you can have, different pictures here, but here's where it costs you. When the capital request comes up at the budget meeting, it's competing against another problem. And they say, put your money where your mouth is, but put your money on what's important. And if you don't have that right information, and this is where we talk about in manufacturing greatness, results come from deeper conversations, right? So we can't just sit in the boardroom and make a decision on that. And the data is showing us that. So, the gap is not that executives don't care about safety. It's that maybe no one's shown them a different way of looking at making that decision. So, the people who feel, they can't fund this fix, they may not be the same people that have that story. And you, the listener, may be the person that can bridge that, right? Because when we're disconnected as an organization, it causes these moments of frustration. Like they're spending money on the cafeteria, and here we have this walkway that needs to be repainted, right? Because it's not as clear on where the stop or the yield is now. And then it gets confusion and frustration. When we're connected, hey, we all know what the priorities are, and we're connected on what good looks like. And that comes from conversations back and forth with other people's ideas. So that's when we start really rolling. That's what this data is telling me. We're sitting in the boardroom and we're trying to make decisions about gloves. And gloves, if you work in manufacturing, you've had a glove problem. Whether you're a shop floor team member or whether you're managing the budget for it. So we're in this meeting, and 100 people, and the executive is leading the meeting. And someone puts up their hand and says, I don't have access to gloves. What? Like obviously that caused a ripple effect, because it's like the executive is like, hey, I know we spend money on gloves. How can you not have gloves? Well, what happened in the background was, trying to control the cost of gloves, we start putting some limits on it, right? Like who can access them, how many you get, how many when the orders come in, maxing the orders out. We have this number of people, we should only need this number of gloves, right? It's all math. The spreadsheet doesn't lie until the person that needs the gloves doesn't have the gloves. And what happens if someone gets cut? Because it doesn't mean they don't have gloves, but it may be that, sometimes we get residue on our gloves and they only last for so long. Sometimes it's depending on, what your manufacturing process is, you need to replace them at a certain rate. And sometimes there just gets to be that disconnect on what was ordered, what was budgeted, and what's available on the floor. Your frontline leader maybe say, hey man, that's all I can get. I can tell you in that plant, everybody got gloves, and we had to change the system. So it wasn't a person problem. It wasn't that the team leader was lazy and wouldn't go get them. It wasn't that the executive wouldn't spend the money. It was a disconnect in the safety system, right? And that's just a callback to episode 188, because we talked there about manufacturing team leadership and keeping people there. Here we're talking about how we do recruiting, manufacturing recruiting, because we want to address the manufacturing labor shortage. And sometimes you can just tie it back to a simple thing like gloves. Do you have a good system for your gloves? Because culture is a safety system, right? And we know that safety is a recruiting system. So culture is a recruiting system. This is how I tie this all back on my perspective of this data. You may have a different perspective, but I'm going to leave you with 3 questions. We like to do that on the show, right? Like something that you can take back and apply based on this data. So when did a candidate last ask you a safety question? What did they say? This could be just someone that you're interviewing, right? This could be someone just, wondering what's going on. It's not because they don't care. It could be just because, nobody's asking. So maybe you need to kind of ask that question, create that conversation. Hey, do you have concerns about safety working here? Anything that you want to know here, because we take this very seriously. Obviously, it can't be just what's written on the wall. It's got to be the behavior. And they're going to check with people that work at your plant. So it's got to be real, right? So that's when you can have opportunities to advocate what you are doing in the plant. If you're doing it in the plant, so those numbers both go down. The people that work there that have safety as concern, and the people that are applying that have safety as concern. Someone once told me, manufacturing, it's not dangerous, but it's unforgiving. And if we have good systems and structure, and if we have a good culture where we can voice our concerns, then hey, it's going to be okay. And then you can go ask your executive team what they believe keeps people from applying. And if safety is not in their answer, then maybe they're solving the wrong problem at the top. And maybe that's just an opportunity to start talking about that. And again, the more we talk about safety and our concerns, then the safer it's going to be. It's going to be more top of mind. Because if we're always talking about production, get the numbers out, that's what we're going to be focused on. So the second thing is just walk your floor as somebody seeing it for the first time. What would they notice first? If you were a new person coming into your plant, what would you notice? How would you feel about safety? Walking in there and just taking a different perspective. And then, just looking at your budget. Like, what'd you approve the last budget? Is there something in the budget, and there's something that you spend money on that a new hire would notice, that they would feel in their first shift, that they would see? What is it about that? Because if you can't name one, then maybe that's the answer, right? And the fact of, hey, are we putting our investments, are we putting our money where people are going to feel it on the shop floor and move the needle? So the people who will not come to your plant and the people who are already there are naming the same barrier. So we can't recruit past this, right? It's a combined, everyone seems to agree, and only you can fix it. And I know you may not be in the situation where you can actually fix it, but you can use your voice. You can ask the questions. We can take some of these questions, take some of these steps, and just start questioning it, right? Of, hey, are we looking at this recruiting problem in manufacturing as a problem that's maybe inside our plant already? So what a bonus, right? Our safety gets better in the plant, and so does our recruiting. It's a win-win. So that's it for today. Thanks for spending time with us. But here's the one action to do this week, right? So ask your executive team or your management team what they think keeps people from applying, and ask 3 people on the floor the same question. And don't tell the other group what one said, and just kind of keep it to yourself. And then you'll have some data. And that gap between the 2 answers will tell you whether you're connected or not. And you can have that right away. So more to come on this. manufacturinggreatness.com/subscribe. You got more questions that you can ask. We're going to be breaking down more of this research, so it's not just me talking through here, but we're going to be providing more bonus content and this exclusive research, and we can all kind of give our own insights on this. So let's see you next week, and stay curious.